Before we begin, make sure you subscribe, hit the like button, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from tonight. Because the story you're about to hear is one of the darkest true crime cases almost no one talks about, and once you hear it, you'll understand why. In the fall of 2006, the quiet town of Ashford, a sleepy suburb outside Portland, Oregon, looked exactly like the kind of place where nothing bad ever happened. Tree-lined streets. Kids riding bicycles at sunset. Neighbors who knew each other by name. The kind of town where people forgot to lock their doors at night because they simply didn't believe anything could go wrong. But on the night of October 12th, that illusion shattered forever. It started with a phone call. At exactly 11:42 p.m., a 911 operator received a call from a trembling teenage boy. His voice was barely understandable. Please send someone. I think something is wrong with my neighbor. The operator tried to calm him down. What's your name? Daniel. Daniel Harper. What happened, Daniel? There was a pause on the line. Then Daniel whispered something that made the operator sit up straight. There's blood everywhere. Police arrived within minutes. The address Daniel gave them belonged to a quiet two-story home at the end of Maple Creek Road. It was owned by a 34-year-old nurse named Laura Bennett, a woman everyone in the neighborhood described as kind, responsible, and deeply private. Laura lived alone. Or at least, that's what everyone thought. When officers stepped out of their patrol cars, the street was eerily quiet. Daniel Harper stood on the sidewalk in pajamas, shaking uncontrollably. His parents stood behind him, trying to comfort him while police approached the house. One officer knelt beside the boy. Daniel, tell me exactly what you saw. Daniel pointed toward Laura's house. I was walking my dog, and the door was open. The officer frowned. Open. Daniel nodded. The lights were on, and I heard something inside. Like someone crying. What did you do next? I walked up to the porch, and I saw blood on the floor. The officers exchanged glances. One of them approached the house slowly, hand resting on his holstered weapon. The front door was slightly ajar. And Daniel wasn't exaggerating. Dark red streaks stained the wooden floor just inside the entrance. The officer pushed the door open. Police. If anyone's inside, make yourself known. Silence. The smell hit them immediately. Copper. Thick. Heavy in the air. The living room looked completely normal at first glance. A couch. A coffee table. Family photos on the wall. But then they saw the trail. A thin line of blood stretched from the front hallway toward the back of the house. It looked like someone had been dragged. The officers followed it cautiously. Every step felt heavier. The trail led them into the kitchen. And that's when they found her. Laura Bennett lay on the floor beside the kitchen island. Her eyes were open, frozen in terror. There was a single deep wound across her throat. But something about the scene immediately disturbed the officers. The kitchen looked organized. Too organized. Nothing was overturned. No signs of struggle. It almost looked staged. One officer leaned closer to the body. Where's the murder weapon? They searched the entire room. Nothing. No knife. No broken objects. No fingerprints on the counters. It was as if whoever committed the crime had carefully erased every trace of their presence. Then something else caught their attention. On the far wall of the kitchen, written in what appeared to be Laura's blood, were 3 words. The letters were uneven, shaky, as if written by someone trembling. The message read, "He is still here." The officers stared at it in silence. One of them turned slowly toward the hallway. Check the rest of the house. The message was true. The killer might still be inside. They moved room by room. Living room. Empty. Bathroom. Empty. Laundry room. Empty. Then they reached the basement door. It was locked. But there was something strange about it. On the other side, they could hear movement. A faint sound. Scraping. One officer knocked. Police. Open the door. No response. The scraping stopped. The officers drew their weapons. Break it. With a heavy kick, the door burst open. They rushed down the stairs. Flashlights cutting through the darkness. Police. Show your hands. At first, the basement looked empty. Concrete floor. Old furniture. Storage boxes stacked against the walls. But then one officer noticed something in the far corner. A mattress. On the floor. And sitting on that mattress was a man. He didn't move when the lights hit his face. He didn't raise his hands. He just sat there staring at them. The officers shouted commands. Get on the ground. Now. The man slowly blinked. Then he smiled. A wide, unsettling smile. One officer approached cautiously. Who are you? The man tilted his head slightly. His voice was calm, almost friendly. "I live here." The officer frowned. "This house belongs to Laura Bennett." The man nodded. "Yes." Then he said something that sent a chill through the entire room. "I've been living here for months." The officers exchanged stunned looks. "Months?" "Yes." He pointed upward, toward the floor above them. "Upstairs." The officer's voice hardened. "What happened to Laura Bennett?" The man stared at them quietly for several seconds. Then he whispered something that investigators would never forget. "She finally noticed me." And in that moment the police realized something terrifying. Laura Bennett hadn't been living alone. For months, someone had been secretly living inside her house. Watching her. Listening to her. Following her every move. And the most disturbing part? That wasn't even the worst thing they were about to discover. Because when detectives searched the basement further, they found something hidden behind the stacked storage boxes. A small wooden door, barely visible, leading into a narrow crawlspace under the house. Inside that crawlspace, they would uncover the truth, and it would reveal a secret so disturbing that even veteran detectives struggled to comprehend it. But the man sitting on the mattress already knew what they were about to find, because he had been waiting for this moment for months. And as police placed him in handcuffs and led him up the stairs, he whispered one final sentence. A sentence that would haunt the entire investigation. "You should check the walls." And when detectives finally did, they realized Laura Bennett had been living inside a nightmare. One that had been silently growing around her. Every single night. By the time the man was placed in the back of the patrol car, the quiet neighborhood of Ashford had transformed into a crime scene. Police tape stretched across Maple Creek Road. Flashing red and blue lights bounced off the windows of nearby houses. And neighbors stood in small clusters on their lawns, whispering to each other, trying to understand how something so horrific could happen just a few doors away. Inside the house, detectives had begun the slow process of documenting everything. Photos, measurements, evidence bags. But the most unsettling discovery was still waiting beneath the floor. The crawlspace. The small wooden door investigators had discovered behind the storage boxes in the basement looked like it had been there for decades. It blended into the wall so perfectly that most people would never notice it. Detective Mark Hargrove crouched in front of it, flashlight in hand. "Whoever built this house, they didn't intend for this to be found easily," he muttered. Another detective pried the door open. A musty smell poured out immediately. Old wood, dust, and something else. Something sour. Hargrove shined his flashlight inside. The space was barely 3 feet high. Just enough room for someone to crawl. "Jesus," one officer whispered. The ground was covered with blankets. Food wrappers. Empty water bottles. Whoever had been inside this crawlspace hadn't just visited it. They had lived there. For a long time. Detectives slowly crawled inside. The beam of the flashlight revealed something that made everyone freeze. Pinned to the wooden beams above were dozens of photographs. All of them were pictures of Laura Bennett. Some were taken from outside her windows. Some were taken inside the house. One photo showed her cooking in the kitchen. Another showed her asleep on the couch. Another showed her brushing her teeth in the bathroom mirror. Each photo was taken secretly. Without her knowledge. Detective Hargrove felt a knot tighten in his stomach. "This guy wasn't just hiding here," he said quietly. "He was studying her." But the photos weren't the only thing in the crawlspace. Further down, investigators found notebooks. Several of them. Thick journals filled with messy handwriting. One detective flipped open the first page. And immediately wished he hadn't. The writing was obsessive, detailed, and deeply disturbing. Every entry described Laura's daily routine. What time she woke up. What she ate for breakfast. What TV shows she watched. Even the exact time she used the bathroom. It was like reading the diary of someone who believed they owned another human being. One page read, "Laura cried tonight while watching a movie. I wanted to comfort her. But she doesn't know I'm here yet." Another entry. "She sings when she cooks. Not very well. But I like hearing it." The detectives kept turning pages. The entry stretched back months. Nearly a year. One detective did the math. This guy has been living in her house for almost 10 months. 10 months. While Laura Bennett lived her normal life upstairs, someone had been living just inches away inside the walls. Listening. Watching. Waiting. Detective Hargrove felt a chill run down his spine. Then they found the final journal. Unlike the others, this one had only a few pages filled in. The writing looked different. More frantic. More unstable. The first entry read, Tonight I almost got caught. The next entry. She heard something in the walls. I stayed quiet for 2 hours. Another page. Laura is starting to suspect something. Hargrove turned the page. The next sentence made the room go silent. She looked right at the vent tonight. I think she knows. Another page. I can't let her tell anyone. The detectives exchanged uneasy glances. Hargrove swallowed hard and turned to the final entry. It was written the same day Laura Bennett died. The words were smeared, as if written with shaking hands. She finally saw me. The journal ended there. For a long moment nobody spoke. Then one detective whispered the question everyone was thinking. What exactly happened upstairs? Meanwhile, at the Ashford Police Department, the man they found in the basement sat calmly in an interrogation room. He had identified himself as Daniel Cross. Age 41. No fixed address. No criminal record. Which made everything even stranger. Detective Laura Simmons entered the room carrying a folder. Cross looked up at her and smiled. Hello. His voice was calm. Too calm. Simmons sat down across from him. You want to explain why you were living inside Laura Bennett's house? Cross shrugged slightly. It's not like she was using that space. Simmons stared at him. You were spying on her for 10 months. Cross shook his head. No. He leaned forward slightly. I was protecting her. Simmons felt a wave of anger rise in her chest. Protecting her? Yes. By hiding in her walls? Cross nodded like it was the most normal thing in the world. You wouldn't understand. Simmons opened the folder and slid a photograph across the table. It was a crime scene photo. Laura Bennett's body on the kitchen floor. Did you do this? Cross looked at the picture. For the first time his expression changed. Not guilt. Not fear. Something else. Sadness. I didn't want to, he said quietly. Simmons leaned forward. Then why did you? Cross stared at the table. She forced me to. Simmons frowned. How? Cross lifted his eyes slowly. By seeing me. The room fell silent. Explain, Simmons said. Cross took a slow breath. For months, everything was perfect. His voice had the strange tone of someone remembering a happy time. I watched her every day. I made sure nobody followed her home. I made sure no one broke into the house. Simmons interrupted him. You broke into the house. Cross shook his head again. No. He looked genuinely confused. I lived there. Simmons forced herself to stay calm. Then what happened that night? Cross's eyes darkened. She came home earlier than usual. His fingers tapped slowly on the table. I was in the crawlspace when she heard something. What kind of sound? Cross looked up. I dropped something. And? She started looking around the house. Simmons leaned forward. Did she find you? Cross nodded slowly. Yes. His voice dropped to a whisper. She opened the basement door. The detective's pen stopped moving. What happened next? Cross stared directly into her eyes. She saw me. Silence filled the room. And then? Simmons asked quietly. Cross swallowed. She started screaming. He paused. And that's when everything went wrong. Simmons felt a cold feeling settle in her chest. Tell me exactly what happened. Cross leaned back in his chair. For the first time since the interrogation started. His smile returned. And what he said next would make detectives realize the case was even darker than they had imagined. Laura wasn't the first person who found me. Detective Laura Simmons didn't move. For several seconds the interrogation room was completely silent. Daniel Cross sat comfortably in his chair, his strange smile still lingering on his face. Simmons slowly leaned forward. What do you mean? Laura wasn't the first person? Cross folded his hands together on the table like someone preparing to tell a story. This isn't the first house I lived in, he said calmly. A cold weight settled in Simmons's chest. How many houses? Cross shrugged. I stopped counting after the fourth. Simmons stared at him, trying to process what he had just said. You're telling me you've done this before? Yes. And those people, the homeowners, did they know you were there? Cross shook his head slowly. Not at first. Simmons felt the room grow colder. What happened when they did find out? Cross looked down at the table. For a moment, his smile disappeared. They got scared. Of course they did. They always do, Cross said softly. Simmons clenched her jaw. And what did you do when they got scared? Cross didn't answer right away. Instead he leaned forward slightly. You know what the worst part is? Simmons said nothing. No one ever notices the small spaces in their own homes. He tapped the table gently with his finger. Crawl spaces. Attics. Vents. Walls. His voice was almost dreamy. You'd be surprised how many houses have hidden spaces. Simmons felt a chill run down her spine. How long have you been doing this? Cross thought about it. Maybe 15 years. 15 years. Simmons slowly opened a new page in her notebook. Start from the beginning. Cross nodded. The first house was in Washington. Small place. Just a man and his dog. What happened? Cross stared past her, lost in memory. He found me after 2 weeks. And? Cross's voice became very quiet. He didn't understand that I was helping him. Simmons already knew what that meant. And the others? Cross smiled faintly. Some lasted longer than others. Detective Simmons felt a growing sense of horror. If Cross was telling the truth, there could be other victims. Other houses. Other families who had no idea someone had been living inside their walls. She closed the notebook slowly. We're going to check every house you've ever been near. Cross didn't seem worried. He simply leaned back in his chair. You won't find them all. Simmons narrowed her eyes. Why not? Cross tilted his head slightly. Because some of the houses don't exist anymore. Explain. Fires. Demolitions. New owners. His smile returned. Time erases things. Simmons stood up from the table. For the first time since the interrogation began, she felt something close to fear. Not just because of what Cross had done, but because of what he might have done that nobody would ever discover. As officers came in to escort Cross back to his cell, he looked up at her one last time. You know the funny thing? Simmons didn't answer. Cross's voice dropped to a whisper. I almost stayed hidden forever. He paused. But Laura looked inside the walls. The cell door slammed shut behind him. Daniel Cross was later convicted of Laura Bennett's murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. But investigators never confirmed how many homes he had secretly lived inside. Or how many people had discovered him too late. And somewhere across America, in houses that look perfectly normal, there are still crawl spaces, still hidden rooms, still places inside the walls where no one ever thinks to look. Which raises a disturbing question. What if someone already has?